Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about best practices of bee policies in Europe. My name is Thomas Klotz and I am a PhD candidate at the School of Governance of the Technical University of Munich. As a political scientist and hobby beekeeper, I got the chance to combine my profession and my hobby. So the topic of my dissertation became Save the Bees, How an Insect Changes Our Democracy. I'm happy to present a part of my dissertation on bee policy to you. Bees are political animals. In the last centuries, bees have been used as a role model for a society where a king or a queen is acting as head of state. Many different philosophers like Plato and rulers like Napoleon Bonaparte refer to the division of labor within a beehive. Nowadays, bees are mostly not linked to an autocratic understanding of societies, rather to a democratic one. The collaboration among the bees to produce something very sweet appears as a role model for contemporary political systems. Some authors even write about ways of behavior we could adopt from the bees, like Thomas de Seeley in his book on honeybee democracy. And, as we have seen in Europe, bees are used to intensify the interest on environmental policy and direct democracy. Most people are having a positive feeling when people are talking about bees, which might come from a long history of honey and candle production. For centuries, beeswax and honey were the only raw materials to enlighten and sweeten our lives. Anyway, bees are used as political symbols in different ways. On the one hand, they are used as representatives of political models that should be adopted by the people. On the other hand, the positive connotation is used to implement far-reaching political changes in the field of environmental and agricultural policies. Political scientists call this political framing. Positive frames, like bees or honey, activate positive feelings that are embedded in our fundamental belief system and make us listen to arguments and support certain positions, even if these positions are concerning a much wider topic than just bees. Bees, and especially honeybees, are seen as an indicator for many challenges insects in general are facing. European honeybees are facing the same challenges most honeybees all over the world do. Unfortunately, we have different kind of diseases. For example, the American foulbrood. We have invasive species like the Asian hornet, and we have parasites like the varroa mite. What is interesting about bee policy? It is mostly beekeepers and their associations that are naming these problems and bringing them into the political discourse. Other challenges that are also harming wild bees, butterflies, and other insects are more popular and discussed in a broader sense. For example, when it comes to the topic of habitat loss, the genetically modified organisms, and especially pesticides. When the topic of bee health comes up, the public discourse focuses mainly on pesticides and their impact on insects. People discuss more about the way we want to live in general, about sustainability, about frugality, about how agricultural policy should be shaped. But although it is just a very small number of beekeepers in Germany, about 150,000, the public discourse often is discussed with a hyperlink to bees. Look what we have done to the bees. In the last decade, honeybees became a symbol for sustainable lifestyle and for the impact of human beings on the environment. Mostly, the fact that honeybees are one of the most important working animals is neglected. Anyway, research has shown that we are losing a lot of bee species in Germany. If we have a look on the German red list of bees, we can see that about 60% of the bee species in Germany are endangered to different grades. These findings are supported by the quite popular so-called study of Krefeld that has shown the decline of insects in total as well as a number of species. If we look on the data of the European Red List of bees, it seems that bees all over the continent are doing much better, but the thing is, we do not know anything concrete about 57% of the bee species. We do not know enough about their habitats, we do not know enough about their preferences. That all led to big discussions in Europe, but especially in Germany, where we had a couple of examples of referendums that show that people do care about bee policy. I would like to talk about two of them and start with the referendum Save the Bees in Bavaria, which is a state in the south of Germany. In advance, I have to say that beekeepers do actually have good connection to political decision makers. Almost every parliamentary group has a contact person that is responsible to take care for the requirements of the beekeepers. They call themselves speakers for bee policy and negotiate on questions about breeding laws, pest and diseases control, safety of honey products, and so on. Nevertheless, we had this referendum Save the Bees. It was initiated by the Ecological Democratic Party, which is not represented in the Bavarian parliament. In a nutshell, this party tries to combine ecological issues and market economy. This is a pretty rough description, I know, but should be enough for now. Anyway, they have started this initiative a couple of months before the election of the Bavarian parliament took place in 2019. And almost everybody was talking about bees and their needs. At first, the discussion concentrated on honeybees, but after a while, the discussion changed a bit because many beekeepers said in interviews that there are problems, of course, like the use of pesticides and so on, but most of them were convinced that they are able to deal with it. Nevertheless, most of the beekeepers supported the initiative, and so did more and more partners like the Green Party, the Social Democrats, the Bavarian Party, a right-wing regional party, but also businesses and NGOs. Although the title still was Save the Bees, the focus seemed to be changing. Suddenly, the farmers saw themselves as scapegoats, as they use pesticides. The debate concentrated then on how our food is produced by the farmers. And if you have a look on the claims of the referendum, it was mostly farmers that were affected by them. I want to give you just a couple of examples. Until 2030, at least 30% of the agricultural land must be used in a sustainable, organic way. Pesticides are banned in protected areas. 10% of the grass on grasslands areas must not be cut before June. Protection of orchids and other natural structure elements. And what is quite important for the genetical exchange of wild bees, at least 13% of land must be combined to a biotop network. Here we see why it is so necessary. Eventually, Save the Bees became the most successful referendum in the democratic history of Bavaria. The Bavarian government had two options to react on this referendum. First, take it as it is and declare it as legally binding. Second, set up an alternative draft and let the people decide whether they prefer the original initiative or the one of the Bavarian government. The government, consisting of the conservative Christian Social Union and the liberal conservative party Freie Wähler, what could be translated as independent voters, decided to take the referendum as it is. But they also established a round table where they brought together interest groups like beekeepers, farmers, NGOs, and politicians. In the end, the referendum became law, but the different interest groups and the government worked on a second law that poured oil on troubled water and set up rules on how farmers are compensated and how the requirements can be implemented on a regional level. Anyway, beekeepers benefited insofar that pesticides are banned in protected areas, 10% of grassland, and with it, dandelions, etc., must not be cut before June, and the Bavarian government has to report annually about the ecological situation in Bavaria. So, what are the best practice examples in the state of Bavaria? First, almost every parliamentary group has a speaker for bee policy. The exchange of information and requirements, etc., seems to be quite useful for both sides, politicians and beekeepers. Second, a round table consisting of different interest groups like NGOs, beekeepers, farmers, food production industries, and so on, seems to be a good way to communicate about different views and requirements. If something like this is established, the probability of a referendum like Save the Bees seems much lower. By the way, the Canadian Honey Council holds annual meetings with representatives of different involved businesses. When I did research overseas, beekeepers and businessmen told me that they were convinced by this form of exchange of interests. Third, a collaboration with many political parties seems fruitful, as the referendum and the fact that there are speakers for bee policy show. Politicians like to be partners of beekeepers, no matter if they are conservative, social democratic, green, or right wing oriented. In the southwest of Germany is the state of Baden Württemberg. After the unpredictable success of the referendum in Bavaria, two beekeepers started a similar initiative there. Their claims were even more far reaching. They wanted at least 50% of organic farming, for example. Some beekeepers' associations, in Germany we have a couple of different ones, were against these strict regulations as they feared that the collaboration between them and the farmers might be under pressure. Moreover, even some ecologists did not support the referendum. The most known one, Johannes Steidle, a professor at the University of Hohenheim, argued that it is not only pesticides that kills bees and other insects. He said that the most important challenges, like land sealing, are neglected. The government of Baden-Württemberg, consisting of the Green Party and the conservative CDU, did not support the claims, but didn't want to have a situation as it was in Bavaria. So they decided to establish a roundtable before the referendum was finished. The initiators and the government found a compromise. What are the best practice examples here? Again, a roundtable that brings together different interest groups and listen to scientists. It is not just the farmers and their pesticides, so to say, but every single person is in charge to save the bees. That's why it is now prohibited in Baden-Württemberg to have backyards that are just consisting of gravel, what is quite popular in Germany and nobody knows why it is. So listen to scientists and remember everybody of its own responsibility. In Austria, there's an umbrella organization, the Biene Österreich, like Bee Austria, that does lobbying work for all beekeepers. This is a huge difference to Germany, where we have a lot of different beekeeping associations. One for the professional beekeepers, plenty for hobby beekeepers, some for organic beekeepers, and so on. What I heard from my interview partners in Austria, they are quite happy to have just one organization as central contact. Biene Österreich provides information about founding programs, breeding, and so on. In Germany, we say 3 beekeepers, 4 opinions. That's why it is quite impressive that the umbrella organization can deal with all kinds of opinions and develops an agenda. Moreover, politicians told me that they appreciate that there is just one umbrella organization they can talk to when it comes to apicultural topics. My final example I want to talk about is on European political level. When the first beekeepers recognized in 2008 that their bees are dying because of the use of neonicotinoids, the European Union declared a moratorium and commissioned the European Food Safety Agency to research on the impact of neonics on bees. From 2013 on, and after long years of discussions, it was prohibited to use these pesticides on flowering plants. After more research, the member states of the European Union decided in 2018 that neonics must not be used anymore in open field agriculture. Nevertheless, plenty of member states permitted the use of neonics. They argued that there is a possible emergency of food shortage. And now, new bee-harming pesticides like sulfoxaflor are authorized. What are the best practice or worst practice examples here? First, research on the impact of pesticides and honeybees or other insects must be respected. Second, you need to have clear responsibilities. Otherwise, countries or regions might permit the use of pesticides that are harming bees. Third, the precautionary principle must be respected. pesticides must be safe and not harmful to pollinating insects. Fourth, learn from other countries that were dealing with these kind of problems before. So, to conclude, what is important to get a sustainable bee policy? First, research on what is harming bees is most important, and also the question what kind of other pollinating insects are affected. Second, clear responsibilities in terms of bee policy. Third, the precautionary principle. Fourth, learning from other countries. Canada is now debating about the ban of neonics. Fifth, roundtables with all kinds of interest groups like beekeepers associations, farmers, NGOs, and so on seem to be very fruitful for the political discussion. And for the beekeepers, it might be very helpful just to have one umbrella organization that combines the interests of beekeepers. And also, the direct contact to politicians is very helpful, as we have seen in Bavaria. So thank you for your kind attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.